Good morning, Social Studies 9. How's everybody doing? Hope you guys had a great weekend. Hope you stayed safe. Hope you're staying in quarantine and all this other stuff, trying to cut down on the curb and everything. Today we're going to be talking about the Youth Criminal Justice Act. We're essentially going to be starting Chapter 2. We're going to be doing this over the next couple weeks. You'll notice on the Google Classroom I kind of reorganized it to hopefully make it a little bit easier for you guys to follow along. But again, if you ever have any questions, you can always post stuff in there, or you can always email me, and we'll get her started, okay? So let's get started on chapter, where are we? Chapter 2. So again, chapter 2 addresses the idea of the Youth Criminal Justice Act, and essentially, does it work for you guys, okay? Is it fair and equitable, right? Essentially what it comes down to, guys, is that you guys as youth, people under the age of 18, almost have like a different set of rules for you guys because you're so young, and because when you're young, we all do it, we all make mistakes. So we're going to talk about that. And is it fair for you guys to have this separate system? Now, some terms I need you to know. You need to know what fair and equitable means. Fair and equitable means it's governed by rules that apply to everyone, taking into account individual needs and circumstances, right? So even though there are rules can be bent, sometimes broken, depending on what the individual has done, depending on where they're coming from, depending on where their needs are, depending on the circumstances, right? Justice is applying laws, and the justice system is the institution of procedures for applying laws to society. So like cops, judges, all that stuff, okay? Now, before we go any further, this right here is what's usually referred to as Lady Justice. Now, what you'll see this everywhere. Why do you think that justice is always blind whenever you see it depicted, right? So she has the scales there. Scales of justice can go in a way. She's got her sword so she can, do what she needs to do. But why is she always blind? I want you to think about that, and we'll come back and we'll talk about that at some point. Okay? Come on, up there. Okay? So, again, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Youth Criminal Justice Act. Now, before we go any further, I want you to pause this video. I want you to go to page 61 of your textbook. I put it up in the Google Classroom in Chapter 2. And read the comic inside the justice system, okay? And as you're reading that, think about these questions. What factors had the biggest impact on this young offender's change in attitude? And what life lessons can we learn from her story, right? Do you think it would have been better off if she'd been charged as an adult and just gone to jail? Or do you think this was a beneficial thing for her? So again, pause that, read that, restart it, and then we'll keep going. Hopefully you did listen, you paused it and you went to that. So now we're going to keep going. We're going to talk about how are youth and adult justice different, right? So hopefully you read the comic. You can understand that maybe some things would have gone a little bit better or worse for her, right? If she'd been tried as an adult and she'd gone to Criminal Code of Canada, right, she would have gone to jail, right? But because she was tried as a youth under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, she was given a couple different options, right? And maybe that worked out for her. I think it did. All right, and I think that's a really good thing for youth of Canada, right? Just because you make a mistake doesn't, and we all do, doesn't mean it should be hanging over you for the rest of your life, right? So essentially, Canada has different legislation for youth and adults who break the law. We've got the Youth Criminal Justice Act for young offenders and the Criminal Code of Canada for adult offenders. The Youth Criminal Justice Act deals with people under the age of 18. It allows you to face consequences such as counseling and community service. It just doesn't always mean jail time. It means if you're 12 to 14, you can't go to jail, right? Even if you committed a serious crime. And it protects the privacy, right? News medias cannot publish names of a young offender unless they receive an adult sentence, and it allows most young offenders to avoid a criminal record. And that's really important because if you make one little mistake and all of a sudden you have a criminal record, there's a lot of things you can't do. You can't leave the country, you can't apply for certain jobs, right? So making just a little mistake can really hang over your head for the rest of your life. And then there's the Criminal Code of Canada. This is where adults get tried. Usually you've got to go to court, adult sentences, which could mean prison time. Your name gets published, and then you get a criminal record, which we've talked about can really hang over your head and really make things difficult for you down the line. Now, the Youth Criminal Justice Act does have 4 main objectives that it wants to get through. It wants to prevent crime by addressing the circumstances underlying the young person's behavior. So maybe they just don't have a safe place to live, right? So how, instead of like putting them in jail, maybe we find them a safe place to live. We try and rehabilitate young offenders and reintegrate them into society. So for example, we don't send them to jail. We find a punishment that they can learn from, right? Maybe it's community service, maybe it's working with youth, maybe it's just doing something else, right? But it's not necessarily just going to jail. The third objective is to make sure they have a meaningful consequence for the offense in order to promote long-term protection, right? So maybe we're going to put them to work in a youth shelter, right? We don't, again, the whole objective here is trying to get them to learn from it so they can contribute back to society. And number 4 is they must recognize that Youth Criminal Justice Act must recognize that young people are separate from adults and have reduced levels of maturity. And you can argue that all you want, but we all know it's true, right? I'm nearly 40 years old. Most of you are 13, 14, maybe 15. Right? We just have different levels of maturity, right? Like it's a long time ago since I was 14, 15, but I'm sure just like you, we can all think back and think we really did some dumb things when we were young. So that's that today. Again, I try and fly through this really fast. If you have any questions, again, just pop it in the Google Classroom, and I'll try and answer them as best I can. Stay safe, stay sharp. Later.